Yesterday, Senator Sanders said that the Democratic establishment forced Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar to drop out of the race. He used the word force. Did you force them to drop out of the race?
Look, the African American community, suburban women, people who are hard-working, high school educated, people who are struggling, they're the ones. That's the establishment of the Democratic Party. And that's what happened. They're the folks who in these primaries voted for me. They voted for me. They're not voting for Bernie. At least they didn't vote for it. They may tomorrow decide they're going to vote for Bernie. But it's not about the establishment forcing anybody out. I mean, Bernie tries to make this all the time, and it's always about pressure. And, you know, I heard, for example, that I have $9 billion or $90 billion billionaires that are supporting me. I've never taken a contribution over $2,800. My average contribution is about, as of yesterday, $44. I mean, we got to stop this kind of stuff. We're running against Donald Trump. We got to start telling the truth about this. And the idea that I heard him say that, well, the Democratic establishment, I guess that means some cabal sitting in a room somewhere said, well, we got to stop Bernie Sanders here, and let's all get together and do the following. I am flattered and I am pleased and I am honored by all the former candidates saying, okay, we had a fair race, we didn't make it. And it's a real hard thing. I've lost before. You know as well as I do, it's hard to say, okay, I lost, but now I'm throwing my full support behind for the following reasons. If you notice, the people endorsing me aren't just generically endorsing me, they're stating why they are for me. And because those who got out and I don't have that fundamental, there's really no fundamental difference in where we want to take the country on healthcare, education, global warming, race relations, a whole range of things. And so I think it's, I'm just very flattered by the support, but the idea there's some establishment sitting back there made up of whoever it is he thinks there are. The folks who brought me back were an overwhelming support from African Americans, significant support from, and by the way, in each of these Super Tuesday primaries, we raised turnout exponentially across the board, and they voted for our candidacy. They voted for our candidacy because now it's getting down to, okay, we got to decide, how are we going to run this election? Who's best positioned to beat Donald Trump, and who do I think can do it and agree with?
When Elizabeth Warren dropped out last week, Bernie Sanders characterized this, at this point, as the race between what he called two old white guys.
I'm a young white guy now.
Rachel Maddow went up to Cambridge, did an hour interview with Elizabeth Warren. Lily Adams was on with me at that night. She's the granddaughter of Ann Richards. She worked on Kamala Harris's campaign. She said it was a gut punch to see all of the leading women candidates knocked out of this campaign. 4 United States senators, the strongest field of women candidates we've ever seen in a presidential campaign. Hillary Clinton was obviously stronger when she ran, but as a field. And do you understand what Lily Adams means by that gut punch, what that felt like to women?
Sure I do. That's why, in 2018, I went on a campaign for more women than anybody else did. We elected 41 new members of the House. I went out in their districts. I went in those purple districts and I helped them win. Well, let me put it this way. They asked me to come in and they won. Not because of me, but in spite of me, maybe. But the point is that I'm not a pundit. There is, for example, I saw there was sexism in Hillary's race. And and it's real. The idea of sexism and racism still exists in the United States of America. That's why I feel so strongly about what I've pushed everything from the Violence Against Women Act to teaching my granddaughters they can do anything my grandson can do.
But is this presidential campaign a lesson to your granddaughters that they can do anything they want to do?
Well, I think so in the sense that, look, every campaign is slightly different. I'm not a pundit, but all I know is that I feel very strongly that there exists sexism and racism still exists in this country in a big way. And as President of the United States, if I'm elected president, I'm going to do all I can to continue to root it out.
The very first presidential decision you will have to make is that decision that Barack Obama made in 2008 to choose you as vice president. That is the first test of a presidency. What does what you've seen of the women campaigning and what you have felt and what you are aware of, that gut punch felt like this week for them dropping out, how does that impact your vice presidential thinking?
Well, first of all, I think there are a number of incredibly competent women capable of being president that have run and haven't even run yet and are out there as senators and governors and the like. And so for me, I think the most important thing in choosing the vice president is whether or not the person is simpatico with me in terms of where I want to take the country. It's really important that the next president is able to do what Barack was able to do with me. Turn and hand over 10, 20% of the portfolio and say, you do it as if you're a president. Because there's so much that lands on a president's desk, he can or she can't do it all by themselves. And so that requires, I trust all the women that are out there if they were to be my vice president. It's presumptuous of me to be talking about this. I'm not the nominee yet. But as someone who is simpatico with where I want to take the country, we can disagree on tactic, but not on strategy. And so that's the first test. And there are a number of women and African Americans as well who would meet that criteria for me. But I've not focused on that at this point. But I promise you, my administration from vice president on is going to look like the country.
In your experience, and I mean your lifetime of political experience and watching this choice made, a running mate, do you think that it's important that it be someone who actually has been tested on that presidential debate stage the way I assume Barack Obama thought it was very important that his vice presidential candidate had already been tested at that level as you were standing beside him on the debate stage?
I think that's a very important factor.
Very important factor. And we're going to leave it at that today?
Yes.
Okay.
By the way, there's a number of women as well who've been tested in other ways, not on the debate stage, but in their debates in their states and being in national figures. So, but yes, I think that's an important factor.
Mr. Vice President, we've known each other 25 years. When you just walked in this room, it's the first time we haven't shaken hands in seeing each other in 25 years. A minor symbol of what has changed in this country and changed so dramatically just over the last few days. What do you have to say to the country about what's happening now with the coronavirus, public health threat, and what we've seen today in the markets, a threat to people's retirement security? Everything that they are expecting in their lives is now being threatened.
Well, look, Lawrence, I don't want to be too critical of the president, but, this gets down to competence and capability. Unfortunately, the president has no competence in how to handle this crisis. Not that there's any clear answer that you're going to make this all go away, but the idea that he shows up at the CDC and says that, this is like everything's just perfect, just like my call to the leader of Ukraine. I mean, people just wonder what's going on, or he's down there golfing today. I mean, there's no sense of urgency. The American people, I think, want to know that their president is on top of this, understands it, and that is being guided by science. Second thing is that in terms of capability, this administration has not moved to take advantage of the capability that exists within the health community, has not prepared local hospitals, has not provided equipment, has not trained personnel, has not thought through. At least if they've thought it through, they haven't announced it to the American people. And the American people are just saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? What's happening? And so just like we walked in and we joked and said, no shaking hands. Well, and I'm following the directions, and so are you, the CDC. And the other thing is there seems to be little coordination with the rest of the world and how we're dealing with this. This is a worldwide pandemic. This is not just the United States of America. And so I think there's a reason why you see the markets falling, and you see the reason why people are very, very upset. But I think if the president were to just get out of the way, let the experts, the CDC and others handle this, speak to it, talk about what needs to be done, we'd all be better off.
Do you think the market reaction is a reaction to the markets realizing the president simply does not tell them or the world or this country the truth about this situation. And a market needs clear information.
I believe that's the case. Now, it doesn't mean the market wouldn't still go down, but it wouldn't collapse, I don't think. Now, who can say? But I think there's no confidence in the president in anything he says or does. He turns everything into what he thinks is a political benefit for himself, and he's actually imploding in the process. But there's a lot of innocent bystanders that are being badly hurt. And I just think I wish he would just be quiet. I really mean it. I'm not, that's a reason. Awful thing to say about a president. We should be quiet. Just let the experts speak and acknowledge whatever they suggest to him is what we should be doing.
Senator Bernie Sanders says that this public health crisis is yet another, in his view, perfect example of why we need a healthcare system with Medicare for all, some version of Medicare for all, at least, because everyone would know, an absolute guarantee, that they would be able to get the treatment they need, and it would not be costing them the way some people have been getting bills.
You don't have to do Medicare for all for that. The Biden proposal, you'd be covered for all of this. The fact of the matter is that everyone would be covered under taking Obamacare, restoring the cuts that have been made, and putting in a public option, a Medicare-like option. And by the way, Medicare, if everybody, let's assume everybody had Medicare covering everything now. Do you think people would be any less concerned? I don't think so.
No, but they'd know how they were going to get their service.
Well, by the way, look, the question is, how are you going to get your service, period? Forget the health care plan for a second. What services does it get? There's none being provided right now. There's not enough testing kits. There's not enough information as to who should be tested and how should be tested. There's not enough information as to what hospitals you go to. There's not enough beds available. And so Medicare doesn't fix that. My plan, the Obamacare that I build on, would take care of it all in terms of the billing and all those things that are concerned about what it's going to cost them. But it does not solve the underlying problem. Where do you go? Who do you talk to? What information do you get? That is not something that if anyone on Medicare today, let me put it this way, anybody's on Medicare today, okay, they have Medicare. Do you think they're any less concerned? The fact that an elderly person who's worried about or is in a nursing home and has Medicare or is working in a way that all their bills are covered from Medicare, they're saying, well, I'm okay, don't worry about this. It goes well beyond that. And again, I don't think Bernie or I should try to turn this into a debate about Medicare for all or Biden plan building on Obamacare. It's much beyond that right now. It's about reinstilling some confidence and being prepared. We are not prepared, and there's things we should be doing. And by the way, the fact that the United States Congress said, Democrats and Republicans said, wait a minute, we have to fund this. We have to get the money out there now. Well, I mean, it goes well beyond a plan. It goes beyond what structures exist in society today, in the United States of America, to deal with this problem. What are they? And anyway,
let's assume, and I've asked other candidates this kind of question, veto question. Let's flash forward. Your president, Bernie Sanders, is still active in the Senate. He manages to get Medicare for all through the Senate in some compromised version, the Elizabeth Warren version or other version. Nancy Pelosi gets a version of it through the House of Representatives. It comes to your desk. Do you veto it?
I would veto anything that delays providing the security and the certainty of health care being available now. If they got that through and by some miracle, and there was an epiphany that occurred, and some miracle occurred that said, okay, it's passed, then you got to look at the cost. I want to know, how did they find the $35 trillion? What is that doing? Is it going to significantly raise taxes on the middle class, which it will? What's going to happen? Look, my opposition isn't to the principle that you should have Medicare. I mean, everybody, healthcare should be a right in America. My opposition relates to whether or not, A, it's doable, two, what the cost is, and what the consequences for the rest of the budget are. How are you going to find $35 trillion over the next 10 years without having profound impacts on everything from taxes for middle class and working class people, as well as the impact on the rest of the budget.
What is going to happen to rallies going forward in this campaign? Are you reconsidering gathering people together, especially in indoor arenas?
I'm looking to the CDC to get guidance on that. What I'm going to do, and to give people reassurance, is I'm not doing the rope lines like I used to, because people...
Are you now just not shaking hands with voters?
Well, no, I haven't. It's awfully hard.
It's hard for you especially.
No, I know when people reach out. But I think that what I'm doing now is, instead of doing what they call for the viewing audience, the rope lines, meaning after a speech you go down and say hello to all the folks and you shake hands, hear their concerns, let them tell you what's on their mind. That, I think, is we're going to be guided by the evolving concern that exists on the part of the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, as to what we should be doing. And so, but for example, the last two events, which surprised everybody, I actually, went down, waved to people, went through, touched arms, fist bump, that kind of thing. And I think you're going to see more of that on the part of everyone. And they're going to be guided by the issue of whether or not we should have big indoor rallies, those kinds of things. That's all in motion right now.
2 soldiers killed yesterday in Iraq. You say that your vote on the Iraq war was based on the President Bush's representations that this wasn't about going to war. It was about presenting a clear, at least, threat to Saddam Hussein. Bernie Sanders says, I saw right through that. I was right. I knew what George Bush was up to. When we look back on it, can we say that Senator Sanders' judgment about that was better than yours?
Look, the reason I voted the way I did was to try to prevent a war from happening, because, remember, the threat was to go to war. The argument was because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So he said that I need to be able to get the Security Council to agree to send in inspectors to put pressure on Saddam to find out whether or not he's producing nuclear weapons. And at the time, I said, that's your reason. All right, I get it. That was the rationale was that's the way to not go to war, because I didn't believe he had those nuclear weapons. I didn't believe he had those weapons of mass destruction. And you may remember the debates we had after that period about when Colin said, anyway. So that was the rationale. What happened was we went in, determined that they hyped what in fact was occurring. They didn't, there was no concrete proof of what he was doing, and they still went to war. And the irony of all ironies is the first thing that Barack Obama did when we got elected president and vice president was turn to me and say, end the war. Not a joke. You run the deal to bring out 150,000+ combat troops from Iraq. And I did. So, the idea that I took the word of a president saying that he wasn't going to go to war, and this was the way to avoid going to war, was in fact a mistake. It was a mistake. I've acknowledged that 15 years ago. But the idea that Bernie Sanders' judgment on foreign policy is superior to mine, I find I'm anxious to debate him on that question.
Final question before you go. You've known Bernie Sanders a long time. He's known you a long time. He calls you a friend. You call him a friend. What do you most admire about Bernie Sanders?
What I most admire about him is his consistency. What worries me, though, is his unwillingness to ever acknowledge that anything he said or suggest could have been a mistake. And the second thing is that I wish he'd level more with all of us about what his proposals are going to cost and what impact it's going to have on people. Like, for example, he has $60 trillion of proposals out there. He thinks he can get it done. How's he going to do that? Even just Medicare for all is going to double the federal budget, per year. The idea that it's not going to affect taxes, not going to require significant cuts in social programs around the world, I just think that's surprising me about him. He started off saying, yep, this is going to increase taxes. They're going to require income tax increase. They're going to require withholding tax increase. And all of a sudden, the candor's gone. And so I think Bernie Sanders is a decent, honorable man. And I think we should be focusing on our substantive differences in an honest way. For example, his attack on me and Social Security. It's just flat wrong. PolitiFact pointed out it's just not true. I don't do things like that. I'm not going to do things like that. And I think it's important. That only helps elect Donald Trump. It doesn't help elect anybody on the Democratic side.
Mr. Vice President, we're out of time because of your schedule, and we will shake hands, I hope, maybe next time.
I hope so, too. I hope so.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And up next, tomorrow.